Our first storyteller for tonight is Dr. Mona Hanna Attisha. Mona has a story about a day at the office that changed a whole city.
Thank you, Falana, and thank you for this opportunity to share my story. We can probably all think of those moments in our lives that have shaped us and defined us, that have changed our worldview and set us on our current paths. For me, one of those moments was when I was just 10 or 11 years old. My family and I were recent immigrants to this country, and my parents were always desperate for any news from back home. And I remember sitting one night with my father, and I can still smell the cigarette smoke and hear the constant static of the shortwave radio. My dad was always tuning the knobs, hoping to pick up something, anything about what was happening in Iraq. Although my parents knew firsthand of the atrocities of Saddam Hussein, the world had yet to learn his name. Leafing through a newspaper, my father then turned to me and shared a photograph. It was a picture of a beautiful, chubby baby girl wrapped in a pink blanket, lying on the ground with her father. They had died in each other's arms. My parents explained to me that it was a chemical weapons attack in Halabja, a Kurdish village in northern Iraq. 5,000 people died that day. An entire city was poisoned by its own government. I have never forgotten that moment, and I never will. That's when I learned that leaders could be dangerous, especially towards certain populations. And that's when I learned to stay vigilant against injustice. But I was in America now, and it was going to be different. I woke up literally every day grateful to be in this country, and as such, committed myself to service, to medicine, and to the most vulnerable among us. I was largely raised in Michigan and ended up in Flint for my medical training over 20 years ago. And you may think of Flint now as that city with brown water coming out of their kitchen taps. Do you guys remember those pictures? But before the water crisis, Flint was famously known as the birthplace of cars and the middle class, and also for what followed, like in so many of our cities: disinvestment, unemployment, poverty, racism, greed, neglect, and indifference. Decades of man made crises. And that left Flint in a near bankrupt state. And if you remember, Flint's democracy was taken away, and the city became under the control of unelected emergency managers. And they decided that one way to save money would be to change our water source from the Great Lakes to the Flint River. So in April of 2014, our former mayor went on TV, pressed a button, and then, surrounded by a bunch of other men in suits, they raised their glasses full of Flint water. As you know, that toast did not herald good tidings. The Flint River water was missing an important ingredient called corrosion control. And it was so corrosive that within a few months, General Motors noticed its engine parts corroding, and the company was allowed to switch back to Great Lakes water. And I'm going to say that again because every time I say it, I can't believe it. Our drinking water was corroding engine parts. Yet the people of Flint who knew something was wrong were told to relax, that everything was in compliance. During this time when all this was happening, I was wrapped up in my world as a pediatrician, a busy mom, a wife, juggling so many balls in the air, just like so many of you do. And I remember one day in clinic when little Nikala came in for her 4-month checkup, and I'll never forget this day. After listening to her heart and her lungs and peeking into her tiny ears and sneaking a smile and a babble, Nikala's mother shared that she was going to start formula feeding. And you make formula by mixing powder with water. And then, with a look in her eyes that I see in the eyes of all parents who are worried about their kids, she asked, "Is the water safe?" Reflexively, I said, "Of course the water is safe. How could our water not be safe?" I thought to myself, we are in America. This is the richest country in the history of the world. It's the 21st century. It's Michigan. We are literally surrounded by the Great Lakes, the largest source of fresh water in the world. But despite all that, there's rules and regulations and people, experts and scientists who wake up every day to make sure that when I turn on my tap and when you turn on your tap that the water is safe to drink. I thought, but I was wrong. The water wasn't safe. And by now, you all know about the Flint water crisis. It's hard to believe, but it's a story that happened here in one of our great American cities. I stopped reassuring my patients when I heard about the possibility of lead in our water. That is when my life changed. As a pediatrician, I know, and most of you know, that lead is a poison. It erodes cognition, it twists behavior, it changes who you are and who you may become. There is no safe level. The corrosive water was eating away at our lead pipes. And knowing there was lead in our water, filling baby bottles and sippy cups, ate away at me too. I literally stopped eating. I lost about 30 pounds. I couldn't sleep. I drank way too much coffee. I was feeling anger and fear and despair and guilt and heartache, a roller coaster of emotions. And I knew that it was not only my professional obligation as a doctor, but my moral and ethical duty, my civic responsibility to do something. That's how my parents raised me, to never look away, to do the right thing, even if it is the hard thing. Working around the clock, I analyzed our hospital medical records to find what I honestly didn't want to find, that yes, there was more lead in the blood of our children. So, armed with that research, I walked out of my clinic with my white coat on and stood up at a press conference sharing that our children were in harm's way. And let me tell you, this is not something that doctors or scientists usually do. And I was pretty sure that everybody could hear my heart pounding through the microphone. I was sharing science and facts, but I was attacked, dismissed, and discredited. Can you imagine being in the middle of a public health crisis and ignoring science and the public's health? Multiple state officials said I was wrong, unfortunate, and even hysterical. I felt defeated and so unbelievably small. And for a quick minute, I began to doubt myself. I started to believe them. But I also believed in my Flint kids, like Nikala. It took a while, but finally, persistence, teamwork, and science spoke truth to power and helped expose our disaster. I can't go into the details of what the impact of the water crisis and lead exposure will have on every child because it will be different for every kid. But with the same speed and urgency that drove the uncovering of the crisis, it has continued in our recovery. The damaged pipes are being replaced. That will be done this year, which is amazing. And as for the kids, when I realized that there was no magic pill that I could prescribe to take the crisis away, and gosh, I wish there was, I went back to the science of what kids need to be healthy. So now in Flint, we have things like expanded healthcare access and home delivery of children's books, new childcare centers, school health services, food prescriptions, trauma informed care, living wage recovery jobs, and so much more. But we still have a lot of work ahead of us. But that made me realize that these awesome things that we are doing in Flint are the things that all kids need to be healthy. Yet across this country, too many of our children wake up to similar nightmares, growing up in places poisoned by inequities, as if their lives don't matter. But it doesn't have to be this way. And that has been the most powerful ripple effect of my story. Turning a moment into a movement, creating a playbook of resistance and hope, and demanding that we build a place where the dreams of all of our children really do come true. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mona, for your story and for your work in service of Flint's children's, and now your leadership on behalf of all children.
Thank you.
Thank you. We so appreciate your story. Mona's story really models civic leadership at a grassroots level.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you like this video, check out these other videos from USA Today to stay up to date with all the latest news.